My name is Celesta. I think we know each other, pretty much all of us. I am the founder and the lead collaborator of a company called Evolve the Com. And I am so privileged to work with an awesome team of which Ben is actually one. And so Ben, thank you. I'm going to introduce you in a moment, but we really appreciate you being here and going through these techniques with us. I'm going to kick it off in just a moment and really just very loosely talk about what resilience is, and maybe not so loosely talk about why it's so important in today's world. And some of you are already bringing in a lot of that tangible evidence. So thank you. And then we'll get into the NLP. I will flip it over to Ben, and he actually is going to walk us through a few different techniques, some of which you might be familiar with or you've maybe tried before. But I'm going to ask you to kind of lean in and just go through these as Ben walks us through, because it's almost like a coaching session, right? We're going to actually be able to try and revisualize some things and rework some things. So I will have Ben do that, and then he's going to flip it back to me to try and tie it together like, hey, this is great. We all are learning resilience, but how does it really help organizations? How does it help sales teams? How does it help you in the work that you do, and kind of bring that back together? So that's our roadmap. I'm so grateful that all of you are on camera. Annie, feel free to join in if that's easy for you, but don't feel obligated. And let me just kind of begin with resilience. I was actually speaking with one of my team members the other day, and she said, "Isn't resilience basically just stress management?" And I was like, "Yeah, yes, and yes, it is stress management." But as someone who struggled with stress management for many years in my early, professional career, resilience is a step beyond that. If I'm imagining like stress out here kind of pushing in on me, resilience is the ability not just to kind of keep it at bay, but actually to work with it, and sometimes even to be agile and adaptable enough to kind of move it and put it in places so that we can stay curious, stay cognitive, stay creative in how we handle stress. And so it really is being able to bounce back and not just kind of manage it and endure it and take it, but actually to recreate it and transform it. And many of us are taught, like, hey, you got it or you don't. That's just not true. Resilience is like a bank account. You can build it up and build resilience when things are easy and great, or when things are hard. And then when things are really hard and you need to draw from that bank account, it's there for you. And many people, and again, myself included, have looked to draw from my bank account of resilience when it's not very full, and I tap out pretty quick because maybe I don't have much there, and I've got some things that, are going on. And there's a lot going on. I don't have to tell any of you, I'm sure, that the world is a big place right now. There are two wars that are very public. That kind of pushes on our subconscious. We know that in the US, we're going into an election year. A lot of people have thoughts about that. The workplace is intense, and there are layoffs, and a lot of people quiet quitting, some people loud quitting. So when you're left behind and you've got a lot of people that are changing in your organization, it can be hard to stay resilient. So that's one reason why we wanted to tackle this topic and sort of start the conversation today, is because these things go fast on us. And if you've got all of that, and I love this Liz Fosling infographic, but if you've got that and you've got life, and welcome, Katie, good to have you, then you've got a situation where you may have fires coming at you from more than one angle. And so, Rob Kwichoff, I'm thinking about you and your team. When you've got fires that are illuminated, how do you keep them further away from you? Even if they're big, even if they're hot, how do you manage them and sort of stay agile in the face of those challenges? So that's why we take resilience so seriously, and why we want to make sure that we're giving everyone as many tools as they can possibly have. And this takes us to Ben. So let me just quickly introduce you, Ben, if that's all right. Ben is a dear friend of mine now, but we actually met as coaches in coaching school years ago. And it became very clear to me from working with Ben that he was not just a superstar intellectually in terms of coaching skills, but that he's also a very sensitive and intuitive individual. And so Ben now teaches for the coaching school, the INLP Center, which is the coaching school where we got certified. And he also freelances in marketing, and he also our VP of marketing. So Ben, thank you, and looking forward to going through this with you.
I'm super excited, and thanks for the intro, which is stellar. Yeah, Celeste and I met at school, and it was a wonderful opportunity to meet each other. We got matched through the software of the school, which kind of assigned us to be coaching buddies. So we got to work together 6 months. I think it was 8 months, coaching each other back and forth. And so we got to bond, and we've been great friends since. A little bit of background. I got into NLP way before I got certified as a master neuro-linguistic practitioner. And it started with Tony Robbins. When I was a kid, I got into Tony Robbins, learned about him and what he did for people. And when I heard that NLP was what got him on the map, and it allowed him to shift people extremely fast by challenging therapists on the radio to send them their toughest, that's how he started out, send them their toughest patients. And he could turn them around in one sitting. I got very curious. I always wanted to help people. I was very driven to help people, but I never found like I had the tools. So I started dabbling with NLP, discovering more about it, reading books, and then eventually I joined the NLP Center, which is what brings us today here. And some of these concepts might be familiar to you guys. Obviously, we're going to tackle the basics of NLP first and foremost for people who are not familiar with the concept. And hopefully you'll get some value from these techniques and then see how they can apply in different contexts. Like for you mentioned motivation, Robert. So that definitely will apply. And yeah, let's go from here. So how many of you haven't heard of NLP, I guess, before? Two Robert said they have. Jada, never? All right, Amanda, either. So to make it very simple, and it'll get simpler once we get to experience it, NLP is simply a method of changing somebody's thoughts, behaviors, and language to help them reach better outcomes in life, right? So we're working with thought, language, and behavior to change the outer world and how we feel about it. It was founded in the 1970s by two guys. One was a student in psychology, the other a professor of linguistics. And they got extremely curious about what makes people successful, what allows therapists to do what they do. And they started modeling some of their behavior, thoughts, and language to replicate their results. And so that kind of became the basis of NLP. And that is still what NLP is today. It's looking at excellence, whether it's outside or within yourself, and replicating that so you can experience better outcomes, better results, get closer to your goals, overcoming your hurdles. NLP has been used originally to cure phobia, to overcome anxiety, and even things like cure stuttering, which is quite amazing. And today it's used a lot more by coaches and personal development professionals to kind of help people reach their goals and overcome whatever is in their way. Our focus today obviously is the workplace, so we're going to tailor that to the workplace specifically. So before we dive in, just a bit of theory before we use the first technique and kind of get into it. That's kind of how I like to approach NLP. Just experiencing it is the best way to explain it. But it's important to understand how the subconscious mind works. Just like your experience of the external world, your internal world is composed of three senses: visual, auditory, and sensation, kinesthetic. And so thoughts always manifests as one of the three in each of us. And we all have experience with thoughts that either were images, sounds, or feelings. But usually one of them is more predominant. We use one more prominently than the other. I, for example, I'm a lot more auditory. So my thoughts sound like an audio tape. They sound like voices. If I remember a moment from the past, they're usually like what somebody said, or what was I telling myself at the time. And so that gives me certain qualities. Like I'm good at remembering names, for example, and I much rather listen to a podcast or an audiobook than a physical book or watch a documentary. Visual people, on the other side, people who predominantly use the visual modality, are much better at noticing details, remembering people's clothing, faces, and places, because their mind plays more like a movie or a carousel of images. Sometimes it's static, sometimes it's moving, but the one thing they have in common is that it's images first. And then the last ones, they're a little bit more rare, are people who are kinesthetic. They're very empathetic people, people who use their feelings and who kind of lead life with their feelings at the forefront. And so when you ask them to imagine, a particular type of food, they might focus on how it feels to eat that food and what remembers them, what memories they have, and they really feel it at the core, usually somewhere around the chest area. Now, as I said this, maybe you guys started guessing what type you were, or you were like, already know what type I am, but let's have a go and kind of see what that's like. So I'm going to ask you guys to close your eyes, and that's something that I'm going to ask you to do a few times today, because it's just a lot easier to experience NLP when you don't have your eyes open. So feel free to keep them open if you want. It's just a lot harder to get the full experience. So let's start by closing our eyes, taking a full breath and trying to relax in this moment. And just notice the first thought that comes to your mind next, and see if it's visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Once you have it, you can either notice the next thought or just open your eyes and come back in. Did that work for everybody? Did you get a thought? Did you catch a thought and kind of see its nature? Feel free to type your answers in the chat. I think I'd be very curious at the end of the webinar to kind of look at through the answers and see what kind of group we have. So that was a little intro just to make you realize how your internal world is structured. But next, I'm going to dive into an exercise called anchoring. And so what we're going to do in a moment is create consciously a thought that is going to make you feel great. We're going to focus on a positive feeling. And when you're at your peak of the feeling, I will ask you to create what we call an anchor. And I'm saying this now because I don't want it to surprise you when I say it out loud during kind of the exercise. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to triple tap the back of your neck with your middle finger. So just be prepared for that. There's nothing to anticipate. There's nothing to understand. We'll dive more into why it works and how it works later. But just so you're prepared, I'm going to ask you to tap the back of your neck with your middle finger. Just do it 5 to 10 times whenever I give you the cue. So let's close our eyes again. And this time, think of a time when you felt proud of yourself. Maybe you just accomplished something significant, or maybe you received recognition for something you'd worked hard on. Step back into that moment as if it were happening right now. Try to bring in as many details as you can. See what you saw then, hear what you heard then, and feel what you felt then. Notice if you're sitting or standing. Is it day or night? Are you inside, outside? Who's with you? How are you dressed? Are there any sounds around you, voices of people you hear? And most importantly, focus on how that moment feels, the emotions and the sense of achievement you're feeling. Let the feelings of that moment flood your body right here, right now. And when you can really feel them deep at your core, fire your anchor. Start tapping the back of your neck with your middle finger. 5 to 10 times, no more. Good. When you're done, you can enjoy the feeling a little bit longer and then open your eyes. So here's a breakdown of what we just did. First step, we elicited a positive state, simply using visualization. Right? We created a feeling out of thin air. And I bet a lot of you, if not all of you, felt pretty good in that moment. The second thing we did is set an anchor. An anchor is just a stimulus, a trigger that we use to trigger to bring back a specific emotional or behavioral state. Most anchors are programmed without our conscious knowing. Right? They happen with us. The red of Coca-Cola, for example, is an anchor. When we see it, we tend to salivate, get thirsty. These kind of just happen for us. But we can also create them consciously, like we just did, to access our most resourceful states when it matters most. And we can use them, for example, to feel confident in a meeting, to feel motivated, or to demonstrate calm in a critical situation when everybody else is panicking. Now, anchors can be either of your feelings. They can be sounds, images, smells. They could be a taste. The ones that tend to work better tend to be touch, like the one we just used. Smells work remarkably well, and then audio works well. For example, forever, I have Lose Yourself by Eminem is anchored to, for me, for like a workout. Whenever I hear that song, and if I'm at the office, I just want to jump up and actually do some push-ups. So like it just fires me up. One example that you all might be familiar with is Pavlov's dog. That's a very famous anchor example. The way it worked is Pavlov was a scientist. He had a dog. Every time he fed his dog, he would ring a bell. Eventually, he just rang the bell without feeding his dog. And what he noticed is that the dog started salivating the same way as if he had providing him with a meal, just showing the power of what anchoring can do for us. And we can use that at work. So creating an empowering anchor. So I'm just showed you kind of the principle and showed you how it works. And you can replicate that with any feeling you want at home. And here are the 4 kind of ingredients. The first one is intensity, right? You want to access a strong state, not a mild state. You can't really anchor being slightly happy or slightly motivated. You want to anchor like a very, very high, powerful state. And you can create the state out of thin air like we just did by visualizing and really stepping into a moment. Or you can just remember to fire the anchor when you feel very confident or when you feel very happy. The second step is timing. It's to set the anchor at the peak of the state. And that's something we might have not done well today, but like there's a 5-second window where emotions usually work like that. And you want to catch the emotion. You want to set the anchor at the very peak of the emotion for it to work really well. The third one is uniqueness. For an anchor to work, it can't be something that you're used to feeling, used to hearing, or used to seeing. Right? Like a handshake probably wouldn't work. A tap on the shoulder, unlikely. But what we did was a little strange, right? Like nobody really goes and taps you gently on the back of your neck. And so that's unique enough that it might just work. And then the last step is replicability. Anchors don't work the first time you set them. And we're going to see in a moment, maybe they did. Sometimes they do. But if it doesn't work, you just repeat the process. So every time you set an anchor, then you test it out. You don't put yourself in any state, you break state, you fire the anchor, and you see what happens. And if it doesn't trigger any emotional response, you go back to visualizing, setting it again, and repeating the process. So let's see. I want to invite all of you to kind of go back and fire that anchor and see if you can feel anything, if it brings back any of this proud feeling we just had a moment earlier. Now we're going to talk about, we found out how to get in a great state. Now we're going to talk about how you rewire and get out of a negative state as fast as possible. So this is the last time I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Again, it just works much better. And this time we're going to close our eyes and think of a time not too long ago, because it helps with it's fresh, when you felt annoyed. And you don't want to pick anything too heavy. Pick something like somebody cutting you off in traffic or somebody showing up late for a meeting. Just getting slightly under your skin. And play the scene in your head. Try to get a visual. Now, once you get it, shift your attention from the content of that scene to the construct of the thought in your mind's eye. And let me explain. Notice that whatever image you see isn't the entirety of your visual field. It is an image floating in space, in a dark space that is behind your eyelids. And if that's hard to see, if the image is taking the entire space, try to zoom out the same way you would on a tablet or on a phone until you can clearly see the edges of that memory. Now, what we're going to do is play with that image a bit and see if we can change how annoying it is. First thing we're going to do is turn the brightness up. You can imagine a little knob on the photo, or you can imagine having a remote control in your hand. It doesn't really matter, but turn the brightness up all the way until it's almost completely white, but you can still perceive its details and see how that feels. And then turn the brightness down, make it almost pitch black, and see how that changes the feeling. All right, now just set the brightness to whatever felt best and leave it at that. Next, we're going to make it big. Take the image, imagine grabbing its edges and just make it as large as you can and see how that feels. Next, make it small as a postage stamp. Tiny, 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 and see how that feels. Finally, let's get rid of it in whatever way you'd like. You can toss it, burn it, step on it, See it disappear in the ether, whatever pleases you, but make sure it's gone, so gone that there's no way for it to come back. When that's done, try to be annoyed and see what happens. You can open your eyes too. I'm noticing some smiles and laughter, so I feel like something happened there. This was a short demonstration of how you can play around with your thoughts to get out of negative states. This can be done with images, sounds, and sensations, right? So you can see here on the slide, like with images, you can make them bigger, smaller, closer, further, brighter, darker. You can rotate them. You can do whatever you want, the same way you would do with a physical photo. Sounds, you can make them louder, quieter, lower, higher, slower, faster. And then sensations are sort of the weirder one, but you can also focus on how a feeling feels. Is it light? Is it heavy, cold, warm, smooth, rough, and kind of play around with it. There's no right answer, which means for some people, making it small might have felt a little uncomfortable. For some people, making it big might have been uncomfortable. It's about understanding how you process thoughts and changing that so you can make your thoughts more of what feels good and less of what feels bad. Now, here are some common ways that you might want to use this technique in workplace. For example, if you feel like you're too close to a problem to see solutions, right? This is language I might use. I'm too close to the problem. Literally, you could close your eyes and imagine that problem and literally push it out until you can completely see the big picture. And in that state, you're going to be a lot more resourceful to make decisions. If you feel like the opinions of others are too loud in your mind and you're having trouble taking action, you could literally imagine what these voices are saying, hear them out, and then turn the volume down all the way down. And from that state, make your decision. And if you have a heavy workload, that would be a kinesthetic one, and you feel overwhelmed, try to locate that feeling and notice what it's made of. You might notice that it's made of like iron or bricks or something. Then just turn it to feathers and feel that feeling lighten up. And I know it sounds silly, but we've done this many, many times with Celesta in sessions, and it works. The thought itself is never the issue. It's the structure of that thought in your mind that makes you feel the way you do. Everyone feels doubt. Everybody feels fear. But for some people, it paralyzes them. Other people, it fuels them. And that's because of how it shows up in their mind. And now we're going to talk about language. You've learned two powerful tools that you can use that use your thoughts. Now, let's talk about the third one. We often think of words as things we use to influence other people, right? But we seldom think about words as something that affects us when we use them. But the fact is, words used over and over become beliefs. They get programmed into our subconscious mind. And beliefs happen to be the deepest rooted mental programs we have. They drive everything in our lives. Because once we have a belief, we take certain action based on that belief. And the actions we take drive the outcomes we get in life. For example, if I believe that money buys happiness, my action is going to be to focus 100% on chasing money. I'm going to deprioritize entirely hanging out with family and friends. I'm going to become more concerned with building transactional relationships rather than meaningful ones. And as a result, my outcome is going to be what? I'm going to feel incomplete, disconnected, and unhappy. It's nearly impossible to change a behavior or to change an outcome without first looking at beliefs and changing that at the root of the problem. You'll see it often with smokers, for example. People trying to quit smoking, they'll often just trying to like get rid of their cigarettes, right? And they'll maybe get a nicotine patch. Maybe they'll sign up for the gym thinking that'll help them. But the moment that they go to a party and somebody offers them a cigarette and they have a few drinks, they will usually accept it. And the reason that is because the inner talk, the thoughts that go in, the beliefs are still, I'm a smoker trying to quit smoking, right? And not I'm a non-smoker. The identity shift hasn't really happened yet. And you can do that with just about anything. So here are some examples of kind of belief statements and inner dialogue that you might want to pay attention to and reframe whenever you catch it. And this might be your inner dialogue, or it might be something that you hear one of your employees or coworkers say, right? And for each of them, I'm going to give you a reframe. A reframe is a very simple word. It's just an alternative way to see things, another story to tell ourselves. And the way you can reframe situation is just by asking yourself, what else could this mean? Right? And so the first one is, if somebody in front of a challenge might say, why even try? Right? It's too damn hard. The reframe would be, this is an opportunity to learn something. After a failure, somebody might say, I messed up. Well, a helpful reframe might be, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but sometimes you learn. I don't have that one dialed in yet. When somebody's asked to step up, sometimes they say, I can't, but the positive, optimistic person will say, I'll try. Right? And when not getting the results one expects, they may say, I'm too old, or they may say, I will get there eventually. And you can see how somebody having the beliefs on the left side will feel differently and live a very different life than the person who has the belief on the right side. Now, how do you find these limiting beliefs for yourself? You pay attention to the things that you say to yourself and to others about why you might not be or have the things that you want. Right? So if somebody say, well, why are you single? You say, well, all the good ones are already taken. Boom, that's a limiting belief right there. Why have you not been promoted in 2 years? Well, I don't have the leadership skills. May be true, but it's still a limiting belief because it prevents you from reaching your goals. So how do you find new empowering beliefs? Once you've got your limiting beliefs, you're like, okay, well, I need new beliefs. I don't really like these beliefs. So how do you do that? There's a framework, and the framework is very simple. It's what we saw earlier: beliefs drives actions, drives outcomes. Flip it around and reverse engineer your empowering beliefs. For example, if I want to get promoted, that's my desired outcome. I need to ask myself, what actions do I need to take for that to happen? What would I have to do this week, this month, this year for that to happen, right? And if that's difficult for me to answer, I could detach myself from the situation and say, what have others done to get promoted in the company? And can I replicate? Can I model that? And that leads to my belief. My new beliefs are, what do I need to believe for me to behave this way? Once you've got a list, once you've got your new beliefs identified, you need to program them into your subconscious mind. And there's two ways to do that. The first one is to repeat them as often as you can. Affirmations, you repeat them in your mind, but you also repeat them out loud. Tell them to other people in conversations, right? Life is great. Life is great. And this is not about positive thinking. It's about verbal hygiene. And the second step is to look for evidence. Look for evidence of your new beliefs being true, no matter how small, and even if it sounds silly. Like, if my new belief is I am creative, that's not true yet, but I'm going to look for evidence that justifies that, right? Like, if company X wasn't responding to my emails and I messaged them on Instagram, I might say that was kind of creative. I managed to get to them eventually. If a colleague asks me my opinion on design ideas that he came up with, I might say, hey, he values my creative opinion. Must mean I'm creative. And I'm making this up, but by doing that, I am reinforcing that belief that I'm trying, because the evidence is always there. The evidence of whatever belief, negative belief or positive belief, you'll always find evidence that validates it. And it's about what you focus on. We can choose to focus on the positive evidence or the negative evidence. And all you have to do once you've chosen your positive beliefs is to open your mind to the fact that they might indeed be true. And then you'll start seeing that evidence around you. It's the experiment of the red car. I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but like, how many, we don't really drive anymore to get to work. I mean, a lot of us don't, but if I ask you, how many red cars did you see going to work this morning? You'd probably say, I don't know, 1, 2, you wouldn't know. But if I ask you tomorrow to pay attention and I'll give you $1,000 if you can give me the right count, your mind is going to notice every single red car that's on the street. And that's the power of attention. You can either decide to ignore opportunities or see them. You can decide to see greatness in people, or you can ignore it. And that is affected by the language we use. In the words of the great Muhammad Ali, it's the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. And once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. And that's a wrap up for sort of the NLP part of the presentation. We've seen 4 things, right? 1, you can get yourself in a positive state by simply visualizing something. 2, you can create anchors to get there even quicker. 3, emotion is driven by the structure of your thoughts, not the content, which is good news because we can change that as we wish. And then 4, the language we use shapes our belief, which determines everything else in our lives. So we've got to pay attention to the words we speak to ourselves and to others.
My question, I guess, as we begin this wrap up is really, why are we so concerned as a company, right? Evolve the calm. Like, why do we care so much about resilience? And why are we using NLP techniques? And how does this really tie into who we are as an organization? And our mission is to make work better for people and to make people better for work. And they go so closely together, and resilience is such a key part and key component of how this happens. And it's just one component, but it is an important one. And when you look at, work being better for people, I have to say, and I'm assuming some of you understand and have maybe been there with me, but there are a lot of people who dread going to work, right? It's just stressful, and there's a lot of overwhelm, there's a lot of burnout, and there's not necessarily always the sense that you have purpose and meaning and understand who you're there with and why you're there. And so when we can make work better for people and they can show up resilient and excited and engaged, companies make more money. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that you have 20%, around 20% sales increase. And Rob, this goes back to sort of what you were bringing up with your team. When employees are resilient and engaged and find that purpose, they're better for the organization. They are now creative. They can look at market changes and anticipate problems before they happen, and look at the competitive set and kind of figure out what their angle is just so much more effectively. And so we know that 90% of leaders are saying, yep, resilience is critical. We need organizational resilience. And what kind of amazes me is that while we see as leaders, hey, we need organizational resilience, yes, because that makes us more profitable, they don't always put their money in the pockets of training and really equipping each individual within the organization to be resilient. And if the individuals can't be resilient and think with that growth mindset and truly be able to stay creative and stay transformative in the face of stress, then the organization can't be resilient, right? You can't have resilient leaders who are leading people that also don't build resilience. So they do tie together. And that's one reason why, we're so grateful that Ben, you came and talked to us and shared this knowledge with people, is because we really focus as a company on these 5 organizational approaches, right? Leadership, team, conflict, culture, and communication. And if you think about any of these, you can't have, for example, conflict transformation without people being able to be resilient. And the more resilient people are, better they can engage in transformative conflict and have constructive collaboration and all the things that are around conflict transformation. So we just want to make sure that if anyone ever wants to, and Rob, I would love to talk to you offline always, that. But if any of you want to connect and find out more about how we can create a strategy for your team or for your organization, or even for you as an individual and you want to meet with one of our coaches, please reach out. We are easy to reach, hopefully, by our website, evolvethecom.com. You can also reach out to the team and get in touch with Ben at evolvethecom.com. And you can always get me at celesta@evolvethecom.com, or you can find us on LinkedIn, which I think most of us are all connected on LinkedIn anyway.